Welcome back, guys, to the C Network. I'm your host, Paul Mayan, and this is a show where we sit down with incredible people from African backgrounds to share their journey. Today, I'm here with Mariam Koslay, a former Fairfax media journalist, a community advocate, and a creative here in Melbourne. So I can't wait to get into this conversation. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited. I know you briefly, but I can't wait to get to know your story more and get to know all the amazing things and why that led you to want to get involved in those community spaces and the jobs that you're doing. But before we get to that, let's start off with where you were born and how that was.
Yeah, so I say as a joke, I was unfortunately born in white Australia. My parents are of a different ethnicity. My mum's Ethiopian and my dad is Somali and Yemeni. But I was born and raised here.
I love that. How was that being raised here with two different parents from different backgrounds?
Well, I say that I have four cultures in me. So 3 from my parents and then the 4th of being raised in Australia. I think at a young age, I was very open-minded to having different cultures and actually quite embraced the idea that I was spoilt for choice. So I had some parts of the family that were Christian, other parts that were Muslim, all these different practices, all these different kinds of philosophies. And I was able to really broaden my understanding of the world through the different cultures and communities that I was put into. And, I was born in Sydney, a really vibrant, diverse community. By the time I'd come to Melbourne, when I'd reached high school in year 7, I'd gone to 7 different schools across 3 states. So by the time I'd come to high school, I felt like, I had a really kind of unique definition of culture, a unique definition of family, a unique definition of kind of friendship. And I felt like I was a bit different to my peers, but it kind of always felt like that was what my life was about. So I really embraced that.
I love that. What language were you speaking when you were at home?
So when I was younger, I spoke Arabic. I could read and write Arabic, Amharic and English. But as I went into the school system, particularly going into lots of different types of schools and the inconsistency in some of the classes, I just unfortunately speak English. But I say that I speak English very well. So that's a joke that I kind of tell people. But unfortunately, English is all I speak. I can understand Amharic. I was living in Ethiopia for a bit. But yeah, for right now, I would say safely English.
I love that. And, I was from Sudan, but I came in, I feel like I'm Australian now.
Yeah.
And, going back, it feels a bit daunting because I feel like I don't know the culture enough. Did you feel that way when you went back or when you went to back to Ethiopia?
Yes and no. I was really determined to understand that part of my culture because I couldn't go to Somalia and I couldn't go to Yemen for obvious reasons. So I felt like Ethiopia was the only opportunity for me to really embrace my culture. At the time, I was really kind of, I think, stable and successful in my job career and was in the process of moving to Canberra to become a journalist that was running out of Parliament. So I had all these different kind of aspirations and goals. But at the time, after Fairfax acquisition and it got taken over by Channel 9 and the clash of kind of values in editorial kind of direction, I decided to do something completely different. So I moved to Ethiopia and I was working as a journalist there. And I think at the time I was just very determined for this new start, and a lot of people have said that to me going back to their motherland. It's been kind of a tension, a bit of a kind of dance between people accepting you. But I kind of walked in and said, hey, that's my personality type. I kind of, you got to fight for it a bit, which is completely okay. And, when I went there at the beginning, people calling me foreigner. Obviously, I couldn't speak Amharic or any other kind of language. I looked maybe different or acted different, but I really kind of stuck to this is my country, this is my land, I deserve to be here, I deserve to develop here, I deserve to have a life here. And I think people just kind of took that, and it just, I still can't wait to move back. That's my goal. So for me, I really call it home, even though I wasn't born there, I didn't have any of my childhood memories there.
I love that. I can't wait to get into your career as well, but I'm really fascinated about that journey back to Ethiopia and more about Ethiopia. How long were you there for?
Only 8 months.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And what was your favorite thing about being back there?
Everything. It just completely unlocked who I was, my goals and aspirations, and being surrounded by everyone that kind of, looked like me. And to be so connected to a rich culture and heritage was something that I was really craving here in what I call white Australia. I feel like here there is so much potential to unlock what this country holds, But I feel like there's lots of systems and there's lots of gatekeeping that prevents that. So as someone that's very in tune with my environment and in tune with the history and the culture of this world, I felt that I was kind of, something was being taken from me. So when I went to Ethiopia, when I was living in Addis Ababa, I felt that my whole world had opened up and I was able to embrace myself as someone that was an African, a Pan-Africanist, but also someone that could actually quite legitimately see my future there and trial it out. So it was a privilege to be able to pursue my goals in that environment and to be supported by my peers, and to have all these different dreams with people that were like me but had a completely different upbringing, and to be able to really feel like it was my home more than the place that had, birthed and, taking care of me up to that point.
I love that. What was the day in life like for you there?
Well, like there's two, as a foreigner, and because of the exchange in money, like it would have been very easy for me to get a car or just, to get a driver and stuff and go into work. But I really wanted to embrace what Ethiopia was for myself. So even though I didn't know how to speak the language and, often as a woman, you shouldn't really be going around and doing stuff by yourself all the time. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, took the public bus at 5:30, 6, grabbed something to eat, went into work, and then came back on public transport as well, just so that I could really embrace it. Some of my peers will never go into public transport, never really walk on the street because they're like, it's dangerous, etc. And I was like, no, this is the only way I'm going to understand. So before I knew it, I was just kind of walking around everywhere, taking public transport everywhere, just to really embrace myself in the everyday life. So, meetings, going out for lunch is very kind of usual for everyone to eat lunch together. Ethiopian food, traditional Ethiopian food, we'd all eat injera together, all have tea together. It kind of felt like I was at home and I was welcomed by people that I didn't even really know.
I love that because we eat injera as well, and it's amazing that you guys are the same. What is Ethiopia known for people that don't know anything about Ethiopia?
That's a really good question. Where do I even begin? Well, Ethiopia is the beginning of civilization. It's the place where they claim that humanity has, quote unquote, begun. So we'll start off with chronologically that. It's a pretty significant
That's a good start.
space when it comes to human civilization. Outside of that, for me, what interests me about Ethiopia is I'm really into music, so Ethiopian jazz. Big prominence in that. You've got Ethiopian Orthodox religion, which plays a big part in the makeup of that country and different kind of Orthodox churches around the world as being one of the oldest religions. Its language is very, very unique. Its landscape is very diverse with rich resources. What else? And right now it's one of the largest, populations in all of Africa, one of the largest growing populations as well. So, I think there's so much about Ethiopia to love, either historically, culturally. Obviously, we've got our food. Coffee came from Ethiopia, bunna. Everyone drinks coffee every day. That originated from Ethiopia, where a shepherd found that when he was dozing underneath a tree. So, all these different, things come from Ethiopia that I think play into everyone's everyday life that they might not know about. And it's something that I'm really proud of.
Well, there you go, guys. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back, guys. If you just joined, I'm your host, Bol Mayan, and I'm here with Mariam. So what I want to get into now is when you got back to Australia from Ethiopia, what were the values that you learned there that you didn't really understand until you got there?
So I feel that we live in a growing society that's very individualistic. So I had adopted that individualism and stepped away from my family and culture. So I think going to Ethiopia and living there, I was able to reignite my appreciation for being in a family, having a family, and being connected to a community and seeing the benefit of that. Walking outside of my house, seeing the same people asking me how I was, if I'd eaten, where I'm going to, and creating what they call here a community practice. But that is embedded in our everyday life in Africa and lots of other parts of the world. So essentially I saw the value in that because I was in a community all the time, regardless of if it was in a professional setting or if I was just out on the street. Next, I realized that we do have a duty of care and responsibility. And I feel that here again, when you're saying, just live your life, you're independent, don't worry about anyone else, take care of yourself, you. Everything from media and marketing really accelerates that. So I feel like it's very easy to fall into the trap of, I'm just going to do exactly what I want. And it's going to be catered to exactly what I want. And in fact, if I can cater every element of my life to that, then I'm successful. That equation has been sold, and is almost arguably a drug, where people have really kind of lost themselves, I think, in their duty and care of responsibility. And that's a big element of why young people aren't participating in politics or critical discourse or democratic discourse, is because they are just looking at themselves and they're not understanding their place in the society and how that looks forward. And we're talking about a legacy here. This is something that is ingrained in the community that I was back in Ethiopia. So I came back with a duty of care and responsibility. What am I doing? How can I share my skill sets? And next is this idea of accountability, which is something that doesn't really happen here. It happens on a very shallow and maybe sporadic environment or notion or movement, however you want to call it. But as a journalist, obviously you're taught about accountability and being objective and being critical. But the sustainability of accountability is something that I was really interested in. How can I hold someone accountable, including myself, continuously? And how could we track that and help people develop? So I really wanted to understand how I could hold myself accountable to what I wanted to do, but also hold my peers and my community accountable to what we deserve and the lives that we should all be fighting for. And for me, I think a core element of advocacy is accountability. Like, before you know what you're fighting for, you need to understand that there is accountability in the core of that function.
When did you go? When did you get back? How old were you when you got back?
I was in my mid-20s.
Okay. So that would have been after high school.
Yeah.
So prior to
after
that,
uni,
yeah. There you go. So prior to that, what was young Miriam like? What were you like in high school?
Wow, that's a really good question. I feel like every time I reflect on it, I get a different version of myself. But like I said before, I stuck to myself. I, enjoyed school, had a good relationship with teachers. I didn't really identify so much, especially going into high school, VCE, as being proud of being as African as maybe some of my peers, and was really individualistic in my wants and needs. Like, sure, I traveled a lot and did all the things that I wanted, which is great, and I don't ever regret the things that I did. But essentially, in terms of becoming someone that's connected to a network or community, I think I really failed in doing more in that space. So when I came back, I don't want to say I was operating out of guilt, but I just realized that there was so much lost time that I could have really been using my skill sets to really support people that really needed it.
Yeah, and I know, when you got back, it's amazing that you kind of were more invested in doing that. But when you were in high school, why was that the case? Why were you not more with your African heritage? Was it the fact that people were calling names like whitewashed, or was there not enough black people in the school that you were at? Like, how did that become the case?
I think, in essence, there's so many different elements to it, but I think for me, it's an unspoken survival. So it's a survival mechanism. So when you've got a collective or dominant way of being, we as humans biologically want to belong. So I think as a young person, growing that independence and stepping away from my family, in that same breath, I was adopting the dominant individualistic culture. And I think that culture was not being proud of your culture or your heritage, not practicing in those rituals. It wasn't spoken. A lot of the things that I think happen in this part of the world are not spoken. And that's why when people express it, it becomes very jarring. And that's an element of oppression. An element of oppression is that very convenient blanket of silence around it. And we know this because in the past, this is what's been explored in lots of different spaces as well, particularly in the African American context. But I think here in Australia, because we are isolated and it's kind of projected as being, very laid back and chill, and you can say whatever you want. Really, there's a deep undercurrent of silence and pain that people are experiencing. And again, that goes back to Indigenous Aboriginal cultures that haven't had fair treatment, have been essentially destroyed, and no one really wants to critically speak about it until now, obviously in the context of the country. But again, that's another conversation.
For sure. And I know with life, it's important to look forward and to keep on going forward and to keep on moving and never to look in the rearview mirror and looking back and whatsoever. But is anything that you regret in that time when you were in high school and up to before you went to Ethiopia that you could now share?
I think there's many things I regret. I don't think I'm really comfortable sharing them. That's me being completely honest. I only say that because, you know, we all kind of make those mistakes.
For sure.
And do things that challenge ourselves and our being or our spirit or our goals. I think the one big thing I regret is undervaluing the potential of my skill sets and really going with the crowd and being a bit of a sheep around, like, I don't want to say suppressing my light to sound so kind of cliche about it, but essentially it was not valuing my potential to the extent that it should have been valued, and really suppressing through lots of different coping mechanisms, a lot of them unhealthy, what I really wanted to do, you know? So essentially that's a big reason why I transitioned into working in youth justice, because I really wanted to share my experiences and some of my failures in trying to support young people, a lot of them of African descent, about how to transition out of a mindset in which you kind of feel like you're in quicksand and you can't kind of get out of that. And obviously my life is a lot better. You know, I feel grateful, privileged contextually, but in saying that, this mental trick, this mental game in which you're questioning yourself and your identity, you could argue has greater impacts.
Well, there you go, guys. Be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back, guys. If you just joined, I'm your host, Bol Mayan, and I'm here with Mariam. What's the relationship you now have with yourself?
I think it's pretty good.
That's good. That's really good.
I think it's really good. Only because I've been critical and I've made a lot of mistakes and I've done lots of different things and I've challenged myself. And I think I'm a kind of person that always tries to challenge myself and put myself into unknown scenarios or among people that are different. Like, you know, I get along with lots of different types of people, lots of different ages, have embraced lots of different countries and their cultures. And I feel like that's really helped fulfill who I am and help me understand where I'm trying to go. Because in saying that, you know, you want to constantly change to develop. That's a core element of development, is change. People often think that those things sit separately, but those things are in sync with each other. So I think you should be changing. You should not be able to recognize yourself positively as long as you understand where that direction is going.
I love that. And before you said you now know where you want to go, what's now on Mariam's bucket list?
Man, my bucket list
the better, but
is so long you wouldn't even believe it. But I think for this year I'm rolling out more workshops, filming African Queens, which is a secondary to, you know, the documentary series African Kings, and also establishing and solidifying this kind of arm of accountability and collaborating with my peers to do bigger work with more impact and taking more chances, you know, because for me, this isn't my home, you know, so if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I've got a whole continent to go back to that'll welcome me. I'm here to do what I can while I'm here and then move back and do the work that I think I should be doing. But for now, I think it's just, you know, advancing my impact, advancing where and who I'm working with, and also refining my practice so that I can hire people, I can take people out there and get them to do the work, because I can't do, obviously, everything. And even though I'm based here in Melbourne, there's so many African people around the country, and I want all of them to have the opportunity to have this kind of conversation, regardless of if they're in a regional setting and in a metropolitan setting. People can be trained to do exactly what I'm doing. And there's so many people that have indicated an interest in doing that. And I think that's really powerful. So I want to tap into that and train them and give them the right resources and anything that it is that they need so that they can go out there and start impacting their own community or other communities.
I love that. With what you're doing, and I know with African Kings was one of the documentaries that you were working on, and now you're going to be doing African Queen. It's awesome to see a lot more projects, a lot more workshops happening, which has been awesome because it's encouraging more people to get out there, to share their stories and to share their experiences. What are some of the positive things you've seen in the African community lately?
I think there are so many positive things. I think there are lots of strengths in terms of our creative expression, in terms of our ability to support each other through challenging times, in terms of our refining our ability to express and demand what it is that we want, especially coming out of COVID, such a mentally challenging time where we're able to maybe snap out of the real impacts and the roots of the causes. And there's a greater and franker conversation about what needs to be done, and hopefully a greater urgency in terms of getting an aligned goal and going towards that. But I think there's also a lot more that needs to be done in lots of other spaces. But for right now, I'm again really interested in people that don't feel that they should tell their story or do have the right to talk about their African experience, if that makes sense. Because unfortunately, I'm identifying an interesting and an unwelcoming culture of African people turning away among their own, you know what I mean, due to lots of different issues that maybe a former oppressor used to hold. You know what I'm saying? So essentially, at the end of the day, regardless of where you sit and what you're doing, we should accept and welcome everyone's different experiences and strive towards helping that person develop, regardless of what area they live in, what they've done, if they've got a job or not, etc. All these people need to be supported. There's more people that are struggling than are succeeding, and we don't have, you know, there's too many skill sets out there that need to be activated. So unfortunately, it's also changing that mindset for that duty of care and responsibility when every second of the day you're told to just think about yourself.
I love that. I love the quote you said before, keep on growing. We have to keep on growing. And just like the plant, just like the seed, just like the seed network.
Yeah.
The whole idea is to plant and to keep on growing.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious to hear what you are here to plant.
Well, again, like I said, I think the seed I'm trying to plant is, I guess, a reminder that we all have a duty of care and responsibility as a member of the diaspora community. And I feel that we all need to go back to the continent and contribute practically our skill sets and also learn to work with each other more positively. You know, we shouldn't have conflict among each other. We should be a bit more welcoming and empathetic towards our experiences and understand that it's tough, you know, because we're all experiencing essentially variations of this kind of oppressive society. But if we leaned on each other more positively, then we'll be able to get through it a lot better.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining. This has been an incredible episode and it means a lot. So thank you so much for giving up your time.
That's all right. Thank you for having me.
No worries. There you go, guys. Thank you so much for watching another episode. I'll see you guys next week. Take care.